everyone. And I want to thank you for attending Will Davidson's annual CLE conference and our first CLE conference over Zoom. My name is Joel Cormier, and in this portion of our conference, we'll be discussing the topic of technology in the post-COVID world. Each of our speakers is going to address a different aspect of this topic. And our goal is that whatever your familiarity with technology, you'll come away with some ideas that will help you tackle the challenges that we're all now facing. Before we get going, I want to introduce you to our speakers today. Joining us, we have Kris Bonn. Kris is managing partner at Bonn Law with offices in Trenton and Belleville. He focuses his practice on personal injury, medical malpractice, and disability, and he is a current vice president of the Ontario Trial Lawyers Association. Also joining us today, we have Charles Gluckstein. He is a partner at Gluckstein Lawyers in Toronto. Charles is a certified specialist in civil litigation who also focuses his practice on personal injury, and he is a past president of the Ontario Trial Lawyers Association. Last but not least, we have with us Michael Ellis. Michael has been practicing plaintiff-side personal injury law since 1998, and he is a current partner with Will Davidson. Welcome, gentlemen. Michael, first of all, I want to start with you. I understand you have some tips to help us with conducting mediations and pretrials remotely, so I'll hand it over to you.
Okay, thanks so much, Joel. You know, when we first were organizing the conference, my topic was going to be doing pretrials mediations over Zoom, and at that point months ago, Zoom was a pretty new technology, I think, for most of us. Now, after a few months have gone by, I feel that everybody is probably almost a Zoom expert by now. So it's what was very new has now become old very quickly. It shows you how quickly technology moves, but I think it's also great to see how fast our profession can sort of adapt to these changing times and can adopt new technologies like this. So you have to forgive me. Some of the things I'm going to be talking about, probably some people already know, but hopefully there's going to be some new little tips here and there that might be useful. You know, the one thing that I've noticed in some people when I've been dealing with mediations and when I've been dealing with pretrials and Zoom is just simple things where people don't get things like lighting in the room correctly. It's very important, of course, that the lighting comes from the front as opposed to the back. You'll see that I'm in a room where I have blinds, and if I open up the blinds and light them, you see everything becomes very dark in terms of the speaker. So that's something that you want to do just to make sure that the focus is on you as opposed to dark areas around you. Keep your laptop or whatever camera you're using raised. You want it to be eye level. And the other thing is to try to when you're speaking to look at the camera. Don't look at the people's faces, which is sort of our natural tendency to do, because if you're looking at the camera, that's essentially the eyeballs of your viewers, and they're going to be looking at you. Third thing is that, again, and this is to try to keep your face forward when you're making a presentation. It's a little more difficult on Zoom to speak and to refer to notes, because if you have notes down here and you're looking down, again, you're not keeping your face forward. You break that lock with the viewers. So one thing that I'll do is I'll either do sort of two things. One, if there's something important that I want to do, I'll put sticky notes and I put them sort of on the edges of my computer. So like up here, I've got a sticky note that I just sort of slap up here, and then that keeps me, again, oriented face forward, so I can use that. The other thing that's useful is to either have a second screen if you have that ability. So if you can have a second monitor that you can keep your pretrial memos up, or your mediation memos, or the notes that you want to make, so that, again, your eyes are face forward. Or I have an iPad that I use, and I just, again, keep the iPad sort of right beside the computer. Again, it's just another way that you can keep the focus on the camera, but at the same time being able to look at the notes that you need to make. Um, One aspect of Zoom that I think is important that I found has been underutilized at pre-trials and mediations is the share screen function. It's very, very simple to do. There is a little button at the bottom of your Zoom screen called Share Screen, and especially in pre-trials today, because now that COVID has taken hold, the majority of the judicial jurisdictions have put pretty strict limits in terms of how long pretrial memos can be. We don't have the luxury of sending in copies of reports, tabs, things of that sort that we used to be able to rely on before. So hopefully it's going to make us better writers, and we'll be able to get things, our arguments in a concise fashion and the evidence that we're trying to get across in a concise fashion. But if you do have certain things that you think will make an impact in a pretrial or at a mediation, use the share screen function when you're giving your presentation, you're giving your opening, or you're making arguments to the judge and opposing counsel. And again, as I said, it's as simple as putting a PowerPoint presentation together that's sort of running behind the Zoom, and then you just click on the share screen button. And all of a sudden you can have people looking at, the graphs that you've put together in terms of your presentation, or you can show photos of the damage that's been suffered by the occupants of vehicles or what have you. It's a very easy thing to do, and it again gets across a message that you want to send, and it also takes some of the sorry, I'm just going to back up here, so we'll edit this a little bit, but by showing either the photographs that you have, it breaks up the attention, it keeps people focused, as opposed to an individual that's just talking and going on and on and on. The other thing you can do with the shared screen are the day in the life videos or clips of your clients speaking. That is also something that would be very useful at mediations, very useful at pretrials, especially now that in most pretrials, the judges are now not having clients online with them, so they aren't able to see the client or speak to the client. So if you have a clip, you have a favorable client that you want to put a clip together of, you share your screen, and it gets their words out, which again is something that's very effective. The last thing I want to mention, and this is a little more complicated, and one thing that I'm sure a lot of us have seen are people whose audio drops out or their screens freeze because there's a bandwidth problem in their house. One of the things that can be done there to try to eliminate that problem, most of us now in our homes or wherever we're Zooming from, we have routers. And a lot of routers, most modern routers now have a setting system in the router software called quality of service, or QoS. And if you take the time, I know it's a little complicated, but if you go online, look at your particular model of router, there's a very simple way to basically get into the settings of the router, look for the tab that says QoS or quality of service, click on that. And most times with most routers, you can have the router sense your particular computer or iPad or whatever it is that you're Zooming from, and you can set it so that all network traffic going in and out of your home or office or wherever you're Zooming from, that your computer has priority. So if you have kids in another room that are playing their games, or something else is happening with somebody else in the house surfing the internet, if you're on an important Zoom call, if the QoS or quality of service is attached to your particular computer, your computer will get priority of that network traffic. And I think you'll see a lot of the dropouts and freezing screens be eliminated. I haven't seen them on mine for the last little while anyway. So those are the few tips that I wanted to just mention and get across, but hopefully everybody is happy Zooming and making great use of this technology.
Thanks, Michael. Now, Charles, I want to turn it over to you because one of the challenges that I think a lot of lawyers are facing now in 2020 is remaining productive. And I understand you have some ideas to help us with that. So I'll turn it over to you.
Okay, thanks, Joel. Thanks for having me at this conference. I think the biggest challenge for us as a personal injury firm was identifying, when we went, basically you had to turn your firm into a virtual firm and figure out where were the pain points in taking, managing your clients in the normal way versus doing it in a digital way. And so I'm going to go through the key points that we addressed. And for us, it was about how do we continue to collaborate as a team? How do we continue to communicate effectively with our clients? And how do we manage all that productivity and sort of monitor it? So there's a lot of technology that everyone's bombarded with, and everyone has their favorite apps for different things. I'm going to focus on a few that we preferred, but there is a lot of stuff out there for document management, for client retention management in terms of, then there's docketing, there's putting documents together, there's outsourcing medical records, there's DocuSign kind of capabilities. So I think for the lawyer, the typical lawyer who wants to go into court and wants to battle for their clients, the technology is always an uphill battle. It's like you're swimming upstream to teach them the new technology. And I've always been the leader in our office to try to force technology down their throats. And I think COVID, what it's taught us is that we have to all learn to adapt if we're going to survive. It's almost like surgery. If you don't know arthroscopic surgery, it's hard to do knee operations the way you used to, and so the surgeons had to learn these new techniques. And for us, that's what we've had to do. We have to learn video conferencing. We have to learn all these things Michael has told us about. And so for us, it was getting everyone set up at home. What's the proper way to set them up at home so they're secure, the data's secure? How should we communicate the telephone and video conferencing, and which apps work best? So I'm going to talk a little about Zoom, but I think Michael covered it. So I agree with him. I think a lot of people have been overburdened with all the techniques on Zoom, so we can minimize that. Filevine is a CRM, which is a case, which just means case retention manager, or customer relationship management program. And that's what we use for basically as a one-stop shop. And I'll go through how it helps us work from home. Caselines is what the court has introduced. It's a Thomson Reuters product. I'll touch on that because it's important. We're all going to have to learn it. That's what they're going to be using. And Domo is a way to just get the analytics for your firms. It's very interesting. So a big push for me has always been to have the dual monitors. I'm actually in front of my dual monitors right now. I've got, if I were to show you my screen, you'd see there's my Zoom. I've got the PowerPoint up. I've got some notes. And I think that's what Michael was talking about, is that you want to be in a very organized way so you can quickly access everything. So I've got the two monitors. I've got a standing desk. It's almost like you're standing at a podium. It's very comfortable. I got a mat underneath me for my feet. I can go up and down with the desk. I got a headset, so there's good communication. I look like, I'm on a radio station, but it works really effectively. And so that's the setup, and the camera's up at the top there. You can see at about eye level. When we go into Zoom, there is, for us, we wanted to keep the face-to-face communication, so we all got licenses with Zoom. We did try Skype for Business. We never tried the Microsoft Teams. I know that works effectively too. Everyone's got their solution. I know there were some security issues at Zoom in the beginning. There were people hijacking the calls, and that was because you're given a unique basically a unique office to use. And the default was to keep giving out your address. So, yoga classes were posted on the internet with a ID, and that was basically a phone number that you could log into. Now the default is to give you a unique ID. So it's very hard to hijack the call. And I think they've now improved the end-to-end security, but I know there's a lot of critics to that. But the courts have chosen it, schools are using it, and we haven't had any issues. I can track the data with it. So There are some etiquette rules, and I've put in a few slides on there. Michael touched on them about the lighting. I think, as well, I've got the lighting sorted out. You should see how you look before you go on screen, sort out your audio. Get comfortable with the technology for sure. For us, the integration with Outlook was very important. So the meetings get set up by your assistant. They sent it out. That was very easy. We also went ahead and used Zoom for our phone system. So it's not just video, but we've now gotten rid of the old phone system, and we're using Zoom phone, which is a VoIP phone. And that works with your iPhone, just like your Zoom app. It's the same app. You just choose whether you're video or phone. All our phone calls are routed, and you basically, it doesn't matter where you're working. You could be in a different country. It all gets routed the same way. And there's also a texting feature, which I've shown on this slide, where we collaborate, and you can see who's on the phone, who's on video. You can see the different colors, people's cell phones. The red means they're on a video call. That green square means they're on their cell phone. And the little dots next to it show the messages. So you can chat with your staff, say, listen, when you're done with this call, give me a call, come to my office, or call me from your home office, et cetera, et cetera. And we use that as inter-office communication. So, in working from home and working, and trying to adapt to the virtual world, we have to think of the balance of the convenience of some of these apps and the security of them. And I do put a large focus on that. The reason I've chosen Filevine for for our sort of CRM system is because it does have the dual authentication. The data is stored in Canada. It has end-to-end encryption, follows the Law Society guidelines. And what I've found is that it's really easy to use. You can basically integrate any program you're using. So if you're using MedChart, for instance, for medical records, it integrates with Filevine. If you're using document management like ACL, that integrates with Filevine. So we've had really, really good use of the integration because Filevine gives out their keys to allow your developers to work with them. So even PC Law I'm working with now to try to integrate it. So just to give you an example of what it looks like, this would be a client, for instance. You see the client's picture, you see some data about the client. You also get a list of vitals, so all the key dates relating to the client's case come down as a drop-down menu. We have a phase list so we can see what phase they're at, and I'll explain later why that's important because we track all those data so we can see what stage all our cases are at. So really, really interesting data collection tool, which at the end, when you pump it all into Domo, which by the way is included with Filevine, you get all this analytics, which is so powerful. So in your feed for each client, you will see the tasks, the notes, texts, anything related to this client. Emails integrate from Outlook, and documents. We use PrimaFact, but we also use Filevine as a document management tool. So you have a feed relating to this client. You also have a feed relating to all your clients. So it's a really, really interesting way. So what's really important is taking in new clients during COVID. How do you do it? You can't meet them at the hospital. You've got to do it online. So I have a virtual intake questionnaire. I fill it in while I'm on the phone with the client. I can send them there's a document generator at the end of it where you can pump out the retainer, all the letters to the providers, et cetera, and you can get the client to sign up with what's called VineSign, which is just like DocuSign. And they can put all their information in there and you send it to their phone. Also, in terms of setting up tasks, it's a much easier system. We used to use Time Matters, very cumbersome, not flexible, not good for remote. Filevine looks great on an iPad, looks great on your phone actually. And you get pretty much the same look. So you just click there's little shortcuts to pull up your assistant's name. You pick the date. You're in the folder. This is a list of all my tasks here that I'm working on. I put in a note. The whole team is updated onto how I'm working. So it's a great collaboration tool. And it also supports texting. So you're in the person's file and you've got a unique text number for each file. So you send out a text to the client and you say, hey, this is the texting number we're going to use for our team. Please save it as Gluckstein, and you can now text us photos, etc. Just give us updates on your file, and it goes out as a text. You can get faxes directly to your, right into the system. So it's got a fax integration, and again, it's got this, this document integration with VineSign, which allows signed documents. So what I loved is that it's ease of use. It's a company in the US, but it's constantly innovating. It's got 2,000 firms, so it's really, really large, and it's constantly trying to satisfy its customer base and grow. So we're really excited about how it's innovating and this type of program we're enjoying. Now, what I love best is that as the admin or the sort of the managing partner, you get a dashboard that tells you everything going on with your firm in a program called Domo, which is included with Filevine. So you will see all the cases that you've got in your office, where they came from, which referral sources, what's the revenue production per lawyer, per, you can compare it. You know, these charts are all interactive. So I used to download the data in Time Matters, put it all in spreadsheets for my presentations to the staff, etc. And it was so cumbersome. This is like a click. So you can see, you can actually also monitor the productivity of your staff. All the clicks in Filevine are tracked. So every time they're opening a task, completing a task, interacting with a client, you get a chart at the end of the day that tells you how many clicks each user had. So you can really use it to monitor staff productivity. So really, really powerful integration. That to me was the closer for Filevine. I did the seminar on Caseline, so just a few notes about this. It's pretty cool that the court is finally innovating and allowing this. This is a Thomson Reuters project. So as of late August, they launched it as a pilot, and basically you're going to be introduced with this interactive. You'll get an email to sign up, but I've already signed up. You can sign up, just go to Caselines and sign up yourself, and then you'll be on their list so they can find you as counsel. The court will create the file, and then it will invite counsel to join this folder. And so Michael was talking about pretrials. You'll be using, even if it is by Zoom, you'll be loading your documents into this document management tool. And so you get the invite, you'll verify it, you put in all your email addresses, your assistant can do that as well once you register, and then you upload from your computer whatever you need to do. You drag and drop. It's very easy to use, and during the hearing, you will be using a sort of a joint case brief. So I just wanted to let you know that that's being expanded to Toronto Civil Court, and you know, I encourage everyone to look at the video and be familiar with that. And I think those were some of the tips I had. Certainly happy to answer any questions.
Well, thank you, Charles. That was very interesting. And I want to turn it over to Kris now. Kris, one of the big questions that a lot of lawyers in Ontario are having, especially personal injury and insurance defense lawyers, is what about jury trials? And I know that you've looked at what at least another jurisdiction is doing. What can you tell us about that?
Thanks, Joel. Yes, it is a significant issue right now in Ontario. For those, I'm sure everyone's heard that there's been 3 recent decisions that I'm aware of where jury notice has been struck so the trial can proceed sooner than later without a jury. And there's 2 of the decisions are reported. I would certainly recommend everyone read those decisions if you've got a civil jury trial coming up in the next several weeks, and there's an issue of whether or not it's going to be delayed. So there's that issue, and there's also the criminal jury trial is resuming this week in Toronto at the Metro Convention Center. There's going to be an actual criminal jury trial scheduled, but reality is these are not going to be able to proceed with the social distancing. Most courtrooms around the province don't have the capacity to safely social distance in this day and age, so we're going to have to find a better way. And we heard from Michael about the use of Zoom for pretrials, and in fact, this morning I was on a trial assignment court with our local court via Zoom, where obviously the judge was present at the courthouse by Zoom. The defense lawyer and myself, also from our offices. It worked very well. It was very easy to use, and we got the job done with respect to scheduling a motion, a summary judgment motion. And so that worked well. But the question is, can we make this technology work for a civil jury trial? And that's the big question. I know at first everyone might be thinking there's no way we could do a virtual trial or a trial by Zoom in front of a jury. And there are some significant questions, but we are seeing it happen in the States. The first was in July 14 in Miami, Florida. It was the first virtual civil jury trial. And in that case, the reports I read were that there were 600 potential jurors who signed up. So certainly the technology did not inhibit public interest in that case. There was significant public participation. The jury selection, as we know in the States, for those who are familiar, it's much more in-depth voir dire in the States. So they questioned the jurors, potential jurors, over Zoom, and chose their jury panel. The proceeding was then live streamed over YouTube. And they called witnesses, and the jury rendered a verdict all through Zoom. So each jury member was in their own home or some other private setting, and they conducted the entire proceeding over Zoom. The reports show that there were some minor glitches. Some of the jury prospects during the voir dire forgot to unmute while answering some questions. There's some background noise. But overall, the process went fairly smoothly, and certainly was something to keep in mind in the future. And then in August 14, Texas held the first criminal virtual jury trial. Now, albeit it was for a traffic ticket, so it wasn't the most serious case, but it was certainly an example of what can be done. I mean, first of all, the first question to ask is, on what basis is someone getting a jury trial over a traffic ticket? But leaving that aside, the process was similar to what we do in Canada. They chose a jury. They called a couple of witnesses. I know the police officer testified with respect to the laser measure to speed tracking device, and the defendant, I believe, testified. And so they went through the whole process, called witnesses, and the jury deliberated through Zoom in a private breakout room and came up with a verdict. The news report showed it took about 30 minutes for them to reach a verdict. So certainly it was something that was done and is an indication that it is what is possible. Now, the judge in that case, in both cases, in fact, came up with some unusual jury instructions that we haven't heard obviously in a normal in-person jury trial. For example, some of the additional instructions were not to be searching. Jurors were instructed not to be searching on Google while the court was in session, not to use their phone while the court was in session, not to be posting on social media, and to make their background settings as quiet as possible, turn off all digital devices, and certainly be in a private area without family members coming in and out. So the question is this the way of the future? Well, I know we've heard recently, unfortunately, that COVID-19 cases are on the upward trend in Ontario, and that's not a good thing. There are civil jury trials being scheduled. I mentioned I was in assignment court this morning, and the trial coordinator indicated that we're booking, at least here in Belleville, civil jury trials to start in the spring of 2021. Now, if we get a second wave or the COVID cases continue to trend upwards, I'm not sure if we'll still be able to proceed with those jury trials, because we still got to think about how are we going to socially distance during a jury trial, calling witnesses, and particularly in a jury deliberation room. That's a big question, is how do you get 6 jurors to sit in a way that they can discuss a case without having some interaction? That's certainly a challenge. So the answer can't be just to continue to delay. So there's certainly going to need to be some adapting by the judiciary, and we've seen that already, and adapting by lawyers. Now, there are some of those who are concerned with virtual jury trials. One of the big concerns that I've read about in the States, and it really hasn't been an issue here in Canada, because I don't believe anyone's proposed a virtual jury trial that I'm aware of, but a big concern is the impact on the jury pool. For example, there are many citizens who may not have access to the internet or have a device that can be used efficiently. And even if they do have the technology, what about training for those who are unfamiliar with using the technology? I mean, for us who are adept at using the technology, we use it every day in our work, it's second nature to us. But think about the 67-year-old person who lives without a computer and doesn't have a smartphone. They may otherwise have been able to travel down to the local courthouse and be selected for a jury, and now they cannot. Or what about the person who can't afford to have a smartphone or can't afford to have a computer, and yet they could have attended trial and been an in-person jury. So there's certainly some questions as to whether or not a virtual jury eliminates a large percentage of the citizenry who would otherwise be able to participate in the jury process. So it could exclude jurors who would otherwise be able to participate in person. And it appears from the research done in the States that it's mostly the lower income individuals who would not be able to participate, because as income rises, the use of technology rises. There's more computers available and smartphones available for those who do have higher income. So the question is, are we then eliminating some lower income jurors? And it may not be such a huge concern for civil juries. I would say it is, but particularly for criminal jurors, juries and criminal defense individuals where their jury, their peers may not be able to be found. So that is one of the concerns. And so we need to look at what we can do. And some other concerns raised were the effectiveness of the demonstrative and the ability to virtually publish exhibits to the jury. We saw from Charles his very effective use of sharing your screen through Zoom. Then the question is, how do we make those exhibits, or how do we make those documents exhibits to the jury? For those who have done a jury trial before, there are some demonstrative aids that are used that are never made exhibits to the trial that go back to the jury room. Well, then how do you differentiate between which documents go to the jury as part of their deliberations and which ones are not? So that's another concern. Also, there's a concern about the impact of the witness appearances and the ability of the jurors to judge their credibility over video. And now there's some question as to whether or not that really matters, because you can see people's faces over video, but some people do question whether or not the limited view is sufficient. And as well, as a lawyer, a lot of work is done in preparing an opening and closing statement. A lot of body language is involved, pacing around the courtroom to emphasize your point, and a lot of that would be lost through a Zoom jury trial. All that being said, notwithstanding these potential hurdles, if we continue to be delayed and unable to proceed with civil jury trials, something has to be done. As the Supreme Court said in Herniak v. Malden, which is the summary judgment decision, the balance between procedure and access to our justice system must come to reflect the modern reality and recognize that new models of adjudication can be fair and just. And the principal goal remains the same: a fair process that results in a just adjudication of disputes. A fair and just process must permit a judge to find the facts necessary to resolve the dispute and to apply the relevant legal principles to the facts as found. However, that process is illusory unless it is also accessible, proportionate, timely, and affordable. The proportionality principle means that the best forum for resolving dispute is not always that with the most painstaking procedure. And those were words written back in 2014, and they're very apt in the current situation where maybe a virtual jury is not the best situation, but it might be the best of a bad situation that we have right now, where we can continue to have civil cases proceed, continue to have a jury decide these cases without losing too much time. So there's no question that a virtual jury trial is not the same as an in-person jury trial, but we all need to adapt and we all need to evolve. And I think, at least in my view, if we're going to be limited in jury trials going forward, then I think this is a way forward to continue with these cases and not lose the jury altogether. And some of these hurdles can be overcome. This is not something I've seen printed anywhere, but it's just some of my own thoughts, is that if civil juries aren't proceeding, we can use these vacant courtrooms to hold jurors at safe social distancing, or we can set up computers where they can view the proceedings remotely. And that way people can still attend if they don't have the technology. We can have jurors gather together in a building where there's physical distancing available, and then have them be able to deliberate in that manner. and we can have the court be able to deliver the exhibits to the jurors in this separate room. So we can all be creative and think of new ways that we can continue to keep the civil justice moving forward, always understanding that the right to a civil jury is a substantive right, and we can't just dismiss it so easily. So we've got to find ways that this can be overcome. And there are ways we can do it. We've seen that with virtual motions. It's been certainly ubiquitous now, where I know early on in March and April, some of my cases, defense lawyers were objecting to proceeding through discoveries by Zoom, and now it's almost routine. I think I've had about 7 discoveries occur in the last 7 months where they're all by Zoom, and they work very well. And so I think we just need to adapt, get over the initial hesitation, and learn how we can use this new technology to continue to move forward and continue to allow the civil jury to decide cases in the future.
Thanks, Kris. And this is definitely something that we should all be concerned about, and we will be watching over the course of the next year or so as this pandemic unfolds. And that concludes our discussion. I want to thank our speakers, Kris, Charles, and Michael. Thank you very much for attending today. I also want to thank our audience. I hope those of you watching found the discussion insightful and interesting. Goodbye, everybody, and stay safe.